time. So Jory, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're at in Nebraska. Welcome, everybody. If we have not met, my name is Mike Delaney. I serve as the Senior Director of Business Partnerships at the Nebraska Hospital Association. My primary role is I help lead NHA Services, which is our preferred business partnership program at the Nebraska Hospital Association. I do that alongside my leader, John Borden. I think John might be on. Yes, he is. Hi, John. Welcome. Today, we're here to talk about price transparency, good faith estimates. I do want to give a little bit of history and context for everyone. Jory Hatton is the president and CEO of ClaraPrice, and they have been a preferred business partner with us at the Nebraska Hospital Association for just over 2 years. We have had resounding feedback from multiple members, and I think this is important, Jory, but ClaraPrice was our most adopted partner in 2023. We had a lot of members adopt their solution for so many different reasons. As you know, and as what you'll learn more, is there's a lot of complexities to price transparency. Couple housekeeping things. I do believe this presentation will take about maybe 20-30 minutes or so. We encourage you to
please call
to engage and ask questions along the way. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question to the audience, you please private message me and I will go ahead and ask it on your behalf. Happy to help. So again, without further ado, this is Jory Hatton, president of ClaraPrice. Jory, the floor is yours, my friend.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mike. Thank you all for being here as well. Really happy to be able to have an opportunity to dig into the price transparency requirements. Again, my name is Jory Hatton. I'm the CEO of a compliance organization based in Austin, Texas called ClaraPrice, and we specialize in hospital price transparency compliance, and we also provide a solution for the No Surprises Act. So I'm one of the resident experts in regard to everything price transparency compliance on our team, and looking forward to digging into some of what's new here in 2024. So a good place to start, I always think it's a good place to start, is kind of giving an overview of what the hospital requirements are, core requirements for the price transparency mandate at the federal level. So the rule initially went into place in terms of implementation in January of 2021. And the hospital price transparency rule focused on 2 core components. Hospitals would need to post a consumer-friendly list of shoppable services, as well as a comprehensive machine-readable file. The difference between those 2 required formats are that the consumer-friendly shoppable services page needs to be friendly to patients. They need to be able to access this consumer-friendly version from the hospital website and be able to browse through it and understand what they're looking at, interact with it, and have, somewhat of a user interface that is easy to use. On the other hand, the comprehensive machine-readable file, or MRF, is the acronym that's most commonly used for that. That is a data format. It's not necessarily going to be viewed by people or users. It is a file format that is meant to be parsed and manipulated or read by a machine. So it looks like a big blob of data that doesn't really make much sense, but to a machine, it's a very important data resource. So those are the 2 core components for hospitals: that consumer-friendly list and the shoppable, and also the comprehensive machine-readable file. There is also a price transparency rule for the payers, for the insurance companies. And we get a lot of questions around transparency and coverage and the difference between transparency and coverage in the hospital price transparency rule, which is part of the OPPS final rule for hospitals. The big difference here is that the payer price transparency rule really focuses on the machine readable file requirement. So there's some crossover there in terms of what those requirements look like for both hospitals and payers, but the payers are not required to come up with that consumer-friendly view or consumer-friendly list of shoppable services. They are to focus on that machine-readable file. And that machine-readable file has its own set of data specifications that are very different from hospitals. It's something that CMS really focused heavily on in terms of developing that machine readable file format for payers. And payers are supposed to be posting these files as of today. It's a federal requirement. And you can go out to the big insurance companies, commercial payers, and find these files and download them. And those should also meet a specific data schema of requirements related to transparency and coverage. So again, some overlap there with the machine readable files, but really different in terms of the data that is required to be posted. So let's talk about what is new in 2024. This is arguably the biggest increase in requirements and the largest shift in requirements that we've seen regarding price transparency since 2021. There are a lot of new requirements that span a breadth of different formats, and hospitals are required to implement these as of actually January 1st. So there's two phases. There's a set of requirements that were to be in place January 1 to meet compliance at the federal level, and there are also another set of requirements that would be required July 1st. That was recent history now. January 1 requirements were relatively straightforward in terms of complexity. So we've got a new text file that hospitals have to post on their website. This file needs to be hosted in the root folder of the hospital's website, so that when you navigate to the website, you can just do a /cmf-hpt.txt and render the file contents. In addition to hosting this file, CMS is now requiring that hospitals add a new price transparency link in the footer of the hospital website, something that they actively audit for. They're looking for that footer link, something that's not necessarily a requirement that we've seen in our new clients that have signed on with us that, either are in an audit scenario or have received a monetary penalty or notice of non-compliance or in some sort of corrective action plan for price transparency. CMS is actively looking for a link in the main navigation of the hospital website too. So although that's not necessarily something that's in the language of the rule, it's something that they do look for, and they will ask hospitals to do that. So that's something to be aware of as you, dig into these requirements and look at implementation and ensuring that you're meeting all aspects of compliance. That text file that gets posted might seem a little strange. Why do hospitals have to do this? Is this something that is really useful for patients? And the answer is it's not for patients. It is an audit tool. So we're going to dig a little bit further down into the machine readable file requirements here in a minute that went into effect July 1. But having this text file in a standardized location allows for federal auditors to easily access the hospital's price transparency resources. They can look for that text file. It should be in the same place for every hospital website. They have contact information for someone at the facility that is, responsible for maintaining compliance, or is the preferred point of contact in regard to any questions relating to price transparency. And they can also access the URLs directly for both the shoppable service list and the machine readable file. So in summary, this just makes the audit process easier. It allows CMS and auditors the ability to access this at a singular location and then find those files with relative ease. So July 1st, this is the big one. New machine readable file template. This is something that has been in development with the CMS technical team for some time, and really takes a lot of cues from what was implemented for the payers in transparency and coverage. So to take somewhat of a step back, when the price transparency rule originally went into effect in January of 2021, it was really the Wild West in regard to what was posted in terms of data format, data points, how that data was organized, where it lived on the hospital website. It was really left very open-ended, and some of the rule language was relatively ambiguous as well. So when CMS started working on transparency and coverage, I think they took a lot of learning experiences from the hospital price transparency rule and tried to rectify some of those challenges while implementing the transparency and coverage rule. So we ended up with a very specific data template that the payers had to post to meet the price transparency requirements. That all changes for hospitals this year. As of July 1st, CMS requires all hospitals to utilize the CMS machine readable file template. There have been multiple versions at this point. They started with version 1 that moved all the way up to version 2.0, which was sort of the initial version of the file that hospitals could post and validate through the CMS validator tool. That has since evolved from version 2.0 all the way up to version 2.2 now with minor adjustments to that template. CMS allows for JSON data files, CSV, Excel, and XML. The preferred template, based on my experience and my conversations with the CMS auditing team and just what I've read in the CMS GitHub repositories and the conversations that are happening there, the preferred data template is the JSON data template. JSON, for those who don't know, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a data it's a data template that is very commonly used in application programming interfaces, which are a modern way for machines to pass information back and forth to one another. So APIs are used every day. You're interacting with APIs, whether you can see them or not, whenever you do anything online. You're passing data back and forth between different platforms and allowing other programs to access that data. JSON is an example of one of the more popular versions of API endpoint data templates that are utilized in modern software applications. So it's no surprise that this is the preferred format. It allows you to nest data within other data points, which makes it very easy to read. There are different JSON data format parsers out there that you can add to your browser extension to format this data and look at it in different ways. It makes it very easy to visualize and read, although this isn't necessarily a data format made for consumers, but you're able to take a look at it if you have some technical knack. The argument against the CSV file, which again, CSV in Excel is acceptable to CMS, but when you try to build this new machine readable file template in a CSV file, you end up with a massive amount of rows and columns in that file because you're dealing with an X and Y axis in regard to storing that data. So you have a row, you have a column to work with, and there are so many different data points required in this file that you end up with this CSV file with a massive amount of columns, and associating that data can become very difficult to visualize while you're actually building the file, and also to associate when you're trying to actually make sense of what you're looking at. So that's my personal argument against CSV. I think anyone with a technical background would likely agree, and that's also why CMS does not necessarily prefer that format, but they allow hospitals to post that file for people that are more comfortable in that sort of ecosystem in regard to generating those file types. So we've got this new machine readable file template. It's comprehensive, a lot of changes within the file. There are schema definitions, template information that are publicly available. I will cover that a little bit more here in just a few minutes, but really the main point here is that all of this is well documented. It's out online. You can go access this information. It's not the easiest to find. So I will say that, if you have questions about this data format or finding these resources, contact me, Jory at ClaraPrice.com. I'm happy to provide these resources in email so you can go out and take a look and familiarize yourself with everything that's available to help hospitals get this stuff in place. So in addition to this, the new machine readable file template, we also have a now publicly available CMS validator tool that actually exists on a website. So you can go out, anyone can go out to this website, download machine readable files, upload those machine readable files into the CMS validator tool, and test them top to bottom, and it will actually spit out line by line errors in terms of if the file meets compliance requirements, or if it doesn't, what's wrong with the different data points, and it gives you feedback and guidance on how to fix those things. So it's a very powerful tool. and not only for auditors and people actually looking to ensure that these files are built correctly, but also for people that are building the files. You know, it provides a sort of a set of guidelines that you can use to ensure that your data is being nested correctly and the template is following the correct schema requirements. So here are these guides and public utilities. CMS now hosts a dedicated page for hospital price transparency compliance information. This is relatively new within the, really started increasing in development and the amount of resources and information available within the past year. So I encourage you to go out and look for this. You can search, you do a Google search for hospital price transparency guidelines, CMS guides, something like that. It should pull up. There's a screenshot here on the page that shows you kind of what that landing page looks like. It essentially is a comprehensive list of all the resources that CMS makes available, including the GitHub repositories, which GitHub repositories are places where technical folks can store source code for software applications, write technical documentation, define coding schemas, all different sorts of things related to computer software. It's very useful in regard to something like a machine readable file schema because of the way that they can format the code and define that information in tables, as well as open that up to changes and feedback from the public. So those GitHub repositories are included in the CMS guides on their public website. There's also a link to that online validator tool. There are two different types of validator tools that CMS makes available. If you are a more technical person, you can download a version of the validator tool that is referred to as a CLI or command line interface utility, which allows you to download a program that you can run on your machine. If you're familiar with the command line, you can pass files back and forth and run it through the terminal. Typically what I've seen, and the reason that I'm bringing this up, is because that CLI utility, based on my experience and interaction with the tool itself, seems to be a little bit ahead of the public website version. So if you want the bleeding edge or a snapshot of what may be coming in future validator tools, it's typically going to be available in that CLI tool first. The most important thing here is that those tools, those validator tools, can easily address any data issues that you have with your hospital machine readable file. Or if you're wanting to, you know, assess the hospital down the road, you want to make sure that their file is compliant, or you want to utilize that file for something, you're able to also access that tool and use it for any hospital machine readable file that gets posted.
Killing true bad guys is not that bad.
So all this comes with a new level of enforcement as well. And that's something that is probably of most concern to anyone responsible for implementing price transparency compliance. You know, with these new website requirements, the complete rebuild of the machine readable file, which is no easy feat for someone who's non-technical or people that, you know, that just don't have familiarity with building these large data sets. You know, we've got these validator tools that are available to the public. We've got tools from auditors at CMS, but typically what auditors are going to be looking for, and what we've seen time and time again, is they start with a website audit. So CMS will go out to the hospital's website. These audits can be random. They can be based on a report from the public. They could also be based on whatever data points they have in their system that show that they should go out and review this hospital's compliance resources. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at the hospital website. They're going to make sure that you have that new text file in place. They are going to make sure that you have links to your price transparency resources on your website and that they're in the appropriate positions. They are going to open your machine readable file. They're going to spot check it to ensure that you've included some of the new requirements in the new data schema. So they're going to look for Medicare Advantage plans. They're going to look for an attestation statement, which, for example, one of the data points in the new machine readable file is this new attestation statement. It's not something that a hospital needs to sign or verbalize or anything like that. It is strictly a data point. It'll say attestation statement in the file, and then it's a canned statement that CMS requires all hospitals to post. If you do not post that exact data point with that exact statement, your machine readable file will fail validation in the validator tool. And that's another point that could be recorded for non-compliance. So it's something you want to make sure that you have in place with the new machine readable file. So the point here is that with all these new requirements, we have another level and another wave of enforcement that's already begun. We see non-compliance notices all the time from prospective clients, and it's something that we have enough experience with. We can usually narrow it down pretty quickly to what the focus points should immediately be to rectify that. But we're seeing auditors looking at all these different data points and going through their checklist on the shoppable services and the machine readable file as well. So they're just a larger set of things that you need to be aware of and make sure that are in place in the coming months. That brings us to the requirements that will be going into effect in 2025. So we've got the January 1 phase of requirements in 2024. We've got July focused on that new machine readable file template and the implementation of all those different data points. And then we've got the 2025 requirements. That's the next wave. The core component of that set of requirements is really around two main topics. Implementation of estimated allowed amounts in the machine readable file and new data points related to posting drugs. So your pharmaceutical items in the machine readable file as well. So estimated allowed amounts, it's pretty hard to understand the language around this requirement. It's not well phrased, in my opinion, and leaves a lot of room for questions. But essentially, the idea here is that when you have a commercial payer contract, or any payer contract for that matter that's negotiated, if you are not able to take the language within that contract and generate a dollar amount, so, typically you'll see something like this. It's a percentage of Medicare or a percentage of the gross charge, and it may be specific to a revenue code range or a set of services. And it can get much more complex, as you all probably know. But if you can't take that language and logically come up with a dollar amount, because there are so many variables and so many conditions to determine what that rate should be, then instead of posting the calculated negotiated rate, you must post an estimated allowed amount for that negotiated rate. And those estimated allowed amounts typically would come from prior claims. You'd be looking at historical billing, looking at 835s, 837s, and actually validating what that estimated allowed amount for that service might be. So that's core requirement for 2025 is getting that in place in the machine readable file for all payer negotiated rates. And then of course we have the drug requirement. So this is going to be unit type and unit cost for all pharmacy items, all drugs. All those need to technically be included in your machine readable file as of today, and always have needed to be in there. All of your pharmacy items, really anything that has a dollar value greater than $0. If you charge for it at the hospital, it should be in your machine readable file. But this takes that one step further and ensures that the machine readable file does include those data points around unit and cost and type. This is something that we've implemented in our machine readable files for a long time now. So we have a lot of experience and understanding of how this should be implemented and how it should look in the file. And the new CMS template is not far from what you'd expect in terms of posting that information. There's another set of requirements for modifiers. So all service codes in the machine readable file should also include modifier information related to that item or service. It seems like something that would be logical, but was never a part of the price transparency rule. So to meet compliance requirements, you never had to post modifiers before. But, logically you would always want to, because these services are different based on modifiers. So again, this is something that's been a part of our machine readable files for a while, but hospitals will need to start adding this data point to their MRF. And then of course the validator changes as well. In 2025 or leading up to 2025, I would say maybe even expect October timeframe, we're going to see technical changes under the hood for the machine readable file validator that's publicly available to take into consideration these new data values and these new data requirements for estimated allowed amount in drugs. So you'll want to make sure that all that information is in your machine readable file leading up to January 2025, so that when you hit January 1st, you are dealing with a machine readable file that meets the most recent compliance requirements, because audits will start pretty soon thereafter. So it's a lot of information, a lot of new changes in 2025, but these are all, although they may be a little bit difficult to understand in terms of reasoning as to why, or the technical changes, or a difficult pill to swallow because it's so much work, there really is a benefit to all of this as well. If all hospitals are posting a standardized data format for their machine readable file, and all payers are posting a standardized data format for the MRF, you now have access to a wealth of information, a database of information that you can utilize in the hospital to do all sorts of different things, to increase your bottom line or to improve your compliance, and make proper charge master updates to benchmark your pricing. So think of it this way: you can now take your hospital's data and the hospital down the street, and because the data formats are the same, you can bump them up against one another. You can do a comparative rate analysis. So it would be much easier for you as a hospital to take that data and get something meaningful out of it, as opposed to, every hospital posting whatever they want. So for sake of example, we are in the process of releasing a new feature to our platform that will allow hospitals to do this. And because we have access to these new text files and new machine readable file templates, the system will allow anyone at the hospital to enter another hospital's URL. It's going to go out with the software. It's going to pull that machine readable file and build a report for a comparative rate analysis. So that's just an example of one thing that you could do with these files. You can also combine hospital machine readable files with payer MRFs. And now you have a wealth of information to determine whether or not your hospital is being reimbursed correctly. Is there an opportunity to identify underpayments? Here's the negotiated rate from the contract. Here is the negotiated rate that the payer posted. Here is the information that we've calculated. Does that match up with what we were actually paid? So all that information can be used to get a much lower level look at the accuracy of information that's going on behind the scenes in regard to billing. And then we've got the No Surprises Act. So the benefit here is that these good faith estimates, and this is an entirely different conversation around compliance and the complexities and questions around the GFE system and the No Surprises Act, but a conversation best served for a different time. But the gist here is that these good faith estimates that should be provided to patients really should be using your price transparency information. You want continuity and consistency there. You don't want to be posting that a service costs something and then provide an estimate to a patient that has a different amount on it. So there's a greater opportunity for synchronicity and consistency between those different compliance requirements if you are utilizing your machine readable file in an appropriate way. And then ultimately, if you have questions around this sort of thing and don't fully understand it, this is, internally at our company, we refer to this whole thing as a significant cognitive load. And onboarding new folks at our company takes a lot of training and knowledge transfer. So this is not an easy subject to understand, and it is far less easy to implement in a way that is fully compliant and scalable, for that matter. So talking with somebody, whether that's someone internally that is a price transparency or compliance expert, a legal consult, an attorney, or an organization like us who just specializes in price transparency compliance and the complexities and the technicalities within, it's always a great idea to talk to someone and it's usually pretty easy to identify where you're falling short, if you're falling short, and to come up with a path forward to rectify some of those issues. So again, consult with an expert if you have questions. it would behoove you to do so. That's it for me. That's an overview of the changes in 2024, looking ahead to 2025. And again, happy to be a resource to anyone on the call. If you have any questions about this sort of thing, you can always send me an email at jory@claraprice.com. We do complimentary price transparency assessments for all NHA member hospitals. So if you want us to take a look at your posted resources or dig into your machine readable file or identify areas for improvement, happy to do so, and happy to be a resource to the members. So thank you all again for taking the time to join, and thank you, Mike, for having me. Pass it back to you.
Absolutely. Jory, that was a wealth of information. Every time I hear your presentations, I feel like I'm drinking water through a fire hose with all the moving pieces here. So at this time, what we'd like to do is open it up for questions. And Jory, there was one in the chat here. Pretty simple. Are you able to send the slide deck after this meeting? Or will our members be able to access the slide deck is the question.
I sure will. Yep. I'll either send it to Mike or I can send. I haven't decided how to communicate with the attendees, if that's going to be just a blast out to everyone. I can provide some resources for price transparency, documents and guides, GitHub guides, and include that deck as well. But either way, we'll get it out to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Jory. We'll give it a minute or two here. Other questions in the price transparency space, or what's on your mind? Oh, one came in. Jory, I have a question. What do you do about prices in your charge master that are tiered based on time? Right now, our charge master shows $0 because it is tiered. Does the charge master have to split these out?
There's no requirement as of today to split those out, but the way that we handle it for interval-based charges is that if there are a defined set of intervals, whether that's 15-minute blocks or 30-minute blocks or hour blocks, we will provide that block and then a description of how that's billed within the machine readable file, or we'll list out each of the intervals as an individual item in service. So either approach, I think, is fine until we have further guidance and further definition around, the complexities for those types of charges.
Great question.
I will also add to that. It's good to know that it's good for everyone to know, based on my experience with many federal and state level audits. Being in Texas, we have Texas Health and Human Services that has a separate set of price transparency requirements that supersede or lay on top of the federal requirements. And we've been through a lot of audits in the state of Texas and had a lot of Texas facilities sign on with our solution because they're in an audit or they've received a penalty. And I would say that auditors have a specific set of things that they go through, a checklist of requirements that they'll go through to ensure that you are compliant. And they aren't as granular as you'd think. So in response to the question about interval charges, their auditors aren't looking for that. They are looking for this new text file. They are looking for the links on your website and placement of all those items. Those are very important to them. That's sort of the first couple steps that they'll hit in an audit. And then they're going to ensure that you have a compliant machine readable file posted, that you have 300 shoppable services posted, and that you are including negotiated rates in both the shoppable services and the machine readable file. Specifically with the MRF, they are looking for commercial negotiated rates, and they will also look for Medicare Advantage plans.
Great context, Jory. Other questions before we conclude? Again, this is your opportunity to ask the expert, or if there's something lingering on your mind. Jory, let's give it just another 30 seconds, just in case someone's typing. I would hate to conclude and miss the opportunity to answer a question, as much as we all enjoy silence. All right. I am not seeing questions come in. As Jory indicated, Jory is very easy to get a hold of. His information is highlighted here on the slide. If you have questions for us at the Nebraska Hospital Association, don't be shy. You can contact myself or John Borton. We're also happy to help. But with that, Jory, thank you. Thank you for spending time and with the membership, and thank you for providing thought leadership in this topic, in this very complex topic. I would argue.
Happy to do so. Thank you all for the time, and I appreciate the invite as well, Mike.
Absolutely. All right. With that, let's conclude. Everyone, have a great week, and we will see you all soon. Thank you very much.